He looked me dead in the eye across that long oak table and said, "There's no chair left, honey. Maybe next time you'll tell your boy not to pick fights." Everyone laughed, that careful, shallow laughter families use when cruelty is disguised as a joke. My son just stood there, clutching his paper plate, eyes darting between his cousins, searching for a place that didn't exist. And me? I swallowed the heat in my chest like poison. Because my own father had just erased my child, in front of everyone. My name is Rachel. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? The air smelled of roasted ham and false forgiveness. The golden grandson, Mason, my brother's boy, sat grinning, his plate piled high. He'd spilled soda all over the tablecloth earlier, and they'd all laughed, called him a wild one. But when my son, Ethan, accidentally bumped Mason's toy truck, my father's face hardened like wet cement. Now Ethan stood beside me, small and trembling, his plate shaking. I wanted to scream. To flip that long table and watch every smug smile fall off their faces. But instead, I smiled. The same polite smile I'd learned to wear since childhood, when love came with rules, and respect came with silence. So I guided Ethan to the porch. We sat on the steps, eating cold potato salad with plastic forks, the laughter behind us muffled by glass. And I realized, it wasn't just about the chair. It was about being told, again and again, that we didn't belong in a story that should have been ours too. When the night ended, my father hugged everyone except us. And when his text came the next morning, "Rent's due tomorrow," I finally decided that silence had served its time. That was the night I began planning how to make my father remember exactly what it feels like to have no seat at the table. The next morning, sunlight slid through the blinds like knives, sharp, accusing, impossible to ignore. Ethan was still asleep on the couch, clutching the little paper gift bag we'd brought for my father. Inside it was a mug that said, "World's Best Grandpa." He'd picked it himself. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the "Rent's due tomorrow" text. No, "Good morning." No, "Thank you for coming." Just another reminder that love in this family had an invoice attached. I typed a reply, deleted it. Then typed again. "It'll be there." But my hands trembled as I hit send. My father was my landlord. After my divorce, he'd offered me one of his old duplexes, until I got back on my feet. What he didn't say was that every month, he'd use that rent as a leash. I owed him for the roof. I owed him for the groceries he helped with. I owed him for being allowed to show up at family events at all. And now, after humiliating my son in front of everyone, he still wanted his money on time. When Ethan woke up, he asked me, "Mom, did Grandpa forget me on purpose?" That question broke something open in me. Not like a snap, more like glass cracking quietly until it can't hold itself together anymore. I knelt down, brushed his hair from his face, and said, "No, baby. He just forgot how to be kind." But the truth? He hadn't forgotten. He'd chosen. That night, when Ethan went to bed, I pulled out the box of old paperwork, tax forms, rent receipts, and the original property deed my father had asked me to sign when I moved in. I read every line. And there it was, buried deep in the small print, like a secret he didn't want me to find. Property may be transferred to tenant ownership upon full repayment of the initial deposit and sustained rental occupancy exceeding 5 years. 5 years. This month made 5 years and 1 week. I ran my finger over the faded ink, my heart thudding. He'd counted on me never reading the fine print. He'd counted on me staying quiet. But this time, his cruelty had woken something. So I picked up my phone and dialed someone I hadn't spoken to in months, my ex-husband, Mark. He answered on the second ring, voice wary. "Rachel?" I swallowed hard. "I need your help. And this time, it's not for me. It's for Ethan." The silence on the line stretched, then he said softly. "What did your father do this time?" I looked at the mug on the counter, "World's Best Grandpa," and whispered. "He forgot his place." Mark showed up the next evening, same truck, same cautious half-smile that used to melt me before life made us both harder. He stepped inside, glanced around the small duplex like he was walking through a memory. "Place still smells like your coffee," he said. I didn't smile. "He still owns it." That was all I had to say. We sat at the table. The same one Ethan did his homework on, the same one I used to cry over bank statements. I slid the deed across to him. "Read the last paragraph," I said. He leaned forward, brow furrowed. "Wait, so if you've paid rent for 5 years, I can claim ownership," I finished. "Legally. It's mine." He looked up, eyes sharp now. "You think your dad knows you figured it out?" "I think he's counting on me not having the guts to fight him." Mark leaned back, exhaled. "Then let's give him a reason to regret counting you out." For the first time in months, I felt the air shift, heavy with something electric, like a storm finally deciding where to break. The plan wasn't simple, but it was clean. I'd file a claim through the housing court. Quietly. No confrontation. No warning. He'd get the letter in the mail, official, stamped, irreversible. Then, when he'd call to rage, I'd be ready. But revenge doesn't always come wrapped in paperwork. Sometimes, it breathes. Because as we talked, Ethan peeked around the corner, holding his worn little toy truck, the one Mason had called trash. Mark saw him and froze. Then his face softened. "Hey, champ," he said gently. "Still got your wheels?" Ethan nodded, eyes brightening. "Mom fixed the wheel for me." Mark looked at me. "You always fix things, don't you?" I wanted to say not always. That I couldn't fix the years my father spent breaking me down just to rebuild me his way. But words failed, and instead, I just whispered, "Not this time. This time, I'm taking back what's mine." When Mark left that night, the sky cracked open with thunder. And as rain began tapping the roof, I opened my laptop and filed the legal notice online. Property transfer claim initiated. It was done. I looked out at the wet streetlights and thought about all the years I begged for a seat at my father's table, the dinners, the silence, the way he'd dismiss me as emotional. Now, I wasn't asking for a seat anymore. I was building my own table. But the storm wasn't done. Because 3 days later, he showed up at my door, suit still pressed, voice trembling with controlled rage. "Rachel," he said, holding the letter. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I met his eyes, steady and cold. "Just taking back my chair, Dad." He stepped inside without asking. He always did. His cologne filled the room, that same sharp, expensive scent that used to announce his arrival before he even spoke. But this time, it didn't smell like authority. It smelled like panic. He slapped the letter down on the counter. "You think you can steal from me?" His voice had that old thunder in it, the kind that used to make me go quiet as a child. But I wasn't a child anymore. "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly. "I paid for 5 years. You signed the contract." He scoffed. "You wouldn't even have a roof without me. Then maybe you should have treated the people under it with a little more respect." He went silent. That kind of silence that fills a room like smoke, thick, dangerous, ready to choke you. Finally, he said, "You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done for you." And that's when I laughed. Not a cruel laugh, a broken one. "Everything you've done for me?" I said. "You mean the years of reminding me that I was nothing without you? The rent I paid on time while you called me a burden? The way you humiliated my son just to prove you still had control?" His face went red, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. "For 5 years, I let you turn love into a transaction. You taught me that silence keeps peace. But now, silence is your weapon losing power." He grabbed the paper again, crumpled it. "You'll regret this, Rachel. Family doesn't betray family." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then maybe you should have remembered that before you betrayed mine." He left without another word. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Ethan came running in, eyes wide. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. We're okay. For the first time, I think we really are." But that night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, my brother, my aunt, even my mother. "What did you do? You're tearing this family apart. Just apologize and drop it before you regret it." I didn't reply. Because none of them had been on that porch with me and Ethan that night, eating cold food while the family feasted. I tucked Ethan into bed, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You'll never have to beg for space again." Then I went to the window and watched lightning tear through the sky. Funny how storms always sound like applause when you've finally stopped being afraid of thunder. But I should have known my father wasn't done. Because by morning, he'd done something that made every ounce of my calm evaporate. He'd locked the gates to the duplex. And left a sign that said, "Property under dispute, access revoked." My father had declared war. The padlock on the gate gleamed like a dare. He'd even changed the code on the side door, the one Ethan used to sneak out and chase fireflies. It was his way of saying, "You may think you've won on paper, but this is still my world." I stood there in the early morning chill, gripping my coffee so tight my knuckles went white. Ethan watched from the window, confusion written all over his face. "Mom, why did Grandpa lock us out?" I forced my voice to stay steady. "Because some people only understand power when they think they've taken it from you." I called the housing court immediately. They said it would take a few days for an injunction to process. A few days. Meanwhile, my father had frozen me out of the one place that was supposed to be home. That night, Ethan and I slept at a cheap roadside motel. $68 a night. The wallpaper peeling like old secrets. He fell asleep clutching his blanket. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment that led us here. Mark called around midnight. "You okay?" "No," I said, my voice flat. "But I will be." There was a pause. "Then, you want me to handle him?" I almost laughed. "No. I want him to watch me handle him." The next morning, I put on the only dress I owned that still made me feel powerful, navy blue, clean lines, no apologies. Ethan stayed with Mark while I drove to my father's house. He opened the door before I even knocked. "You came to your senses," he said. I smiled coldly. "Actually, I came to give you a gift." He looked confused. I handed him an envelope. Inside were copies of every rent payment I'd ever made, dated, signed, stamped. His face drained of color. "What is this?" "Proof," I said softly. "Of everything you've pretended I owed you." He tried to speak, but I cut him off. Do you know what it's like to grow up believing love was something you had to earn every month? That every favor came with a price tag? You built your kingdom on guilt, Dad. But today, I'm tearing down the walls. He stepped closer, voice trembling. You think you can embarrass me like this? I met his eyes. I think embarrassment is the least of what you deserve. I turned to leave, but stopped at the doorway. You forgot one thing, I said quietly. The same girl you tried to silence grew up to be a woman who learned your language, and now she's fluent. Back in the car, I opened my phone. The court's message glowed on the screen. Temporary injunction approved. Tenant access restored immediately. For the first time in years, I laughed until my chest ached. Not because it was funny, but because power finally sounded like my own name being spoken without fear. That night, Ethan and I returned home. The gate was still locked, but I didn't wait for permission. I broke the padlock myself, the metal snapping clean. When I walked inside, I whispered to the walls. Welcome home. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. My father wasn't the type to lose quietly. And the message waiting for me in my mailbox proved it. The letter in the mailbox was thick, official-looking, and smelled faintly of his cologne. It wasn't from the court. It was from him. Inside was a single page, typed, signed, and stapled to a photo. The photo was of Ethan and me sitting on the porch at the reunion, eating alone. I hadn't even noticed anyone take it. The letter read, If you're so eager to destroy this family, I'll make sure the world knows who you really are, the ungrateful daughter who bites the hand that fed her. I have stories, Rachel. Old ones. Ones that'll ruin you if I tell them the right way. My hands shook. I could almost hear his voice between the lines, calm, self-righteous, dripping with that false kindness that fooled everyone but me. But what he didn't know was that his threats no longer hit the same. Fear loses its grip once you've already been left out in the cold. I tucked the letter back into the envelope and stared at the photo. That picture, that moment, was supposed to shame me. Instead, it reminded me why I started this fight. Because Ethan's little face in that photo said everything, quiet, confused, still waiting for the kind of love that didn't come with conditions. I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was breaking a bloodline curse. That evening, I called Mark again. He listened as I read the letter. When I finished, there was a long silence before he said, Rachel, he's never going to stop unless you make him. I'm trying, I said softly. But he's always been the man everyone believes, not the man he really is. Then show them, Mark said. Use his own words. His own threats. I looked again at the photo, at the polished threat typed beneath his name. He'd just handed me his confession, pride disguised as blackmail. So I took it to the court the next morning. Filed it as evidence of coercion and harassment. The clerk looked at me like she saw something familiar, a woman standing up, finally. You're doing the right thing, she said. When I got home that afternoon, I found him waiting on the porch. No smile this time. No cologne. Just rage wrapped in a calm face. You think this will end well for you? He asked. I stepped closer, heart pounding but steady. No, I said. It'll end right. And that's enough. He leaned in, voice low. You're just like your mother. Always pretending to be strong. I smiled faintly. She had to be. You made sure of that. For a second, something flickered in his eyes, fear, maybe. Or memory. Then he turned and walked away. That night, rain fell again, the kind that hums against windows like a lullaby and a warning all at once. Ethan crawled into my bed, whispered, "Mom, are we in trouble?" I held him close. "No, baby. Not this time." "He is." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The next morning, my father tried a different tactic. Instead of threats, he went public. Facebook posts, texts to my aunts, even messages to my old neighbors. "Rachel is being unreasonable. She's trying to take what isn't hers." The words burned. I could almost hear the laughter of the relatives who'd always looked down on me. But this time, I didn't flinch. I posted my own response. Calm. Precise. For 5 years, I paid rent on time. Every month. I honored the contract. If anyone doubts it, the court records are public. You can choose to side with truth or lies. Within hours, people began to notice. Some relatives reached out privately, apologizing. Others stayed quiet, afraid to take sides. And somewhere in the mix, Mason, the so-called golden grandson, started asking questions about Ethan. It was subtle, but I saw it. Doubt was creeping in. By noon, a lawyer called. "You have a temporary restraining order against him. Any further harassment is a violation of law." I felt the weight of years pressing off my shoulders. Finally, the system, cold, bureaucratic, impartial, had my back. That evening, Ethan and I went to our porch. The house felt different, quieter, freer. I held him on my lap, traced the lines of his small hands, and whispered. "You'll never have to fight for your place at the table again. Not with me around." But my father wasn't finished. He called my brother, spreading rumors, lies about my character, my intentions, my past mistakes. I knew the next wave would hit hard, so I prepared. I gathered evidence, documented every lie, every manipulation. Emails, texts, receipts, photos, all lined up like a silent army. And I realized, for the first time, that revenge didn't have to be loud or messy. It could be quiet, precise, and unstoppable. I remembered the mornings Ethan and I had spent alone, eating cold food while the family feasted. I remembered the humiliation, the silence, the invisible walls my father had built. And I promised myself, no one, not even him, would ever feel that control over us again. That night, I sent an email to my father's business associates, carefully wording the truth. No lies, no embellishments, just the facts he'd tried to hide. By morning, I started hearing whispers in the neighborhood. People began to question the man they'd always thought untouchable. And for the first time, I saw fear flicker in my father's eyes. It wasn't enough yet. But it was the beginning. The calm before the storm. It all came to a head one rainy afternoon. The sky was heavy, the clouds swollen like they carried every grudge, every insult, every injustice I'd endured. I stood at the front door of my father's office, Ethan beside me, the envelope of evidence in my hand. He looked up, eyes narrowing, lips pressed tight. "You think you can humiliate me in front of my colleagues?" I smiled. Not the weak smile of a child begging for approval, the calm, cold smile of someone who had spent years sharpening every move. "No, Dad," I said. "I'm not humiliating you. I'm showing the truth. For everyone to see. Including yourself." I handed the envelope to his assistant, a young woman who looked uncertain. "This contains evidence of harassment, manipulation, and coercion," I said. "Everything Rachel said is true. You can verify it, if you choose." My father's face paled as murmurs started spreading through the office. People whispered. Phones clicked. Eyes widened. He opened his mouth to argue, to defend, to control, but the room no longer belonged to him. I turned to Ethan, who gripped my hand tightly. "You're safe now," I whispered. "No one can erase you anymore." My father's phone buzzed incessantly. Messages, calls, confirmations from banks, legal notices. The empire he had built on fear was crumbling. And with every beep, every ping, he realized the tables had turned. He tried to storm out, to salvage dignity, but the doors locked automatically. Security, informed ahead by Mark and me, would not let him leave until the matter was resolved legally. And in that moment, I saw him clearly, not the invincible man he had always pretended to be, but a man afraid of accountability, stripped bare. Ethan tugged at my sleeve, eyes wide. "Mom, did we win?" I looked down at him, at his small hands still clutching mine, and smiled. "Yes, baby. We did." Weeks later, the court finalized the property claim. The online posts exposing his lies went viral in our community. Relatives who had mocked us were now forced to reckon with the truth. My father, once untouchable, was reduced to silence, his power dissolved in the wake of his own arrogance. I stood on the porch that night, Ethan asleep inside, and breathed in the rain-soaked air. It smelled like freedom, like justice, like the kind of calm that only comes after storms. And I understood something profound: revenge isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about reclaiming every piece of yourself they tried to take. No more silences. No more invisible walls. Just truth, hard and luminous, shining where darkness once ruled. I whispered into the storm, not for him to hear, but for me. "This is the life we deserve." The rain fell around me, fierce, cleansing, final.